Hey, welcome. So today, we're diving into a pretty provocative idea. The idea that faith isn't just some blind leap in the dark, but something you can actually arrive at through evidence. We're going to break down a logical framework for Christian belief, pulling from philosophy, a little bit of history, and even the universe itself. So let's jump in and see how this whole case gets made.
And really, this is the big question, isn't it? I mean, for a lot of us, faith and reason, they feel like they're on opposite teams. But the whole perspective we're looking at today says, hold on a second, maybe they can work together. The idea is that real faith isn't blind at all. It's more like a trust that's built on a solid foundation of evidence.
Okay, so the case we're going to unpack here isn't about feelings, or just personal stories. Not at all. It's actually a structured three-part argument, and it builds its foundation on evidence from three totally different places: the universe all around us, our own human nature, and finally, the historical record.
All right, so the first pillar of this whole framework, it starts as big as you can possibly get: the universe itself. The argument is basically this: the cosmos isn't just silent, empty, random space. It's actually full of signals, clear signals that seem to point toward an intelligent source.
Now this has a fancy name. It's called the teleological argument. But don't worry about the term. The idea is super simple. When you see something that's incredibly complex and perfectly ordered, things that just couldn't happen by random chance, it's totally logical to think, hey, somebody designed this. It's that classic example. If you find a watch on a beach, you know for a fact it didn't just assemble itself from sand and water.
And one of the main pieces of evidence for this whole argument is what scientists call the fine-tuning of the Earth. Just think about it. The conditions needed for life to exist are on a razor's edge. If our planet were just a tiny bit closer to the sun, we'd be toast. A little farther away, a frozen wasteland. This insane level of precision, from our atmosphere to the very tilt of our planet, is pretty much exhibit A for the whole deliberate design idea.
And you know what's crazy? This is not a new idea. Long before we had modern physics, the psalmist was saying the exact same thing. The point is that the universe isn't just there. It's not silent or random. It's actually making a statement, a declaration.
Okay, let's move on to the next pillar and see how this argument starts to build. We're going to shift gears here, zooming in from the vastness of the cosmos to something much more personal. We're talking about the internal evidence that's found inside every single one of us, that gut feeling of right and wrong.
So this one is called the moral argument, and it's based on a really simple observation. No matter where you go in the world, people have this built-in sense of justice. Even a little kid, right? A toddler who can't even spell will stomp their foot and scream, "That's not fair." So the big question this argument asks is, where did that universal idea of fair even come from?
Well, this kind of leaves us with two very different ways of looking at the world. On the one hand, if there's no real objective standard for morality, then all you're left with is survival of the fittest. Basically, whoever is strongest wins, and that's that. But on the other hand, if we all instinctively feel that some things are truly evil and other things are truly good, then this argument says that points to a standard that exists outside of us. It points to a moral lawgiver.
And, just like before, this philosophical idea has really deep roots in Scripture. The Apostle Paul made the case that this moral law isn't something we just learn in school. It's something we inherently know. He described it as being written on our hearts, like it's hardwired right into our consciousness, acting as this sort of built-in moral compass.
Okay, but let's be real. No framework, no argument is complete until you really stress test it, right? Any logical case for faith has to go up against some really tough and totally reasonable questions. So let's not shy away from them. Let's tackle the biggest ones.
And this is probably the biggest one of all, the problem of suffering. If there's a good, all-powerful designer out there, then why is this world so full of pain and heartbreak? Now, the classic theological answer usually revolves around free will, the idea that for love or any real relationship to mean anything, it has to be a choice. And with the choice to do good comes the possibility of choosing to do evil and facing the consequences that come with it.
And then, of course, there's the question of all the other world religions. If this logical framework is pointing to one specific truth, what about the billions of people who believe something else? From the Christian perspective we're exploring, the argument is often that while everyone is searching for truth, this particular framework makes a very unique claim, one that's rooted in verifiable historical events, and that's what supposedly sets it apart.
But this next one, this is the real linchpin. Okay, so let's say the universe points to a creator and our conscience points to a lawgiver. How do we know anything else about them? Well, the source that's put forward is the Bible. And here's the deal. If that book isn't reliable, the entire framework we've just built completely collapses. The whole thing falls apart. So the absolute crucial question becomes, can you actually trust it? And that brings us to our third and final pillar.
So, this is it, our third and final piece of the argument. And it's all about looking at the Bible, but not just as a sacred book that you have to accept blindly. No, the idea here is to treat it like a historical document, like a manual, you could say, and to test it, to see if it holds up against external evidence.
Okay, and there's a really critical rule for this kind of test. You can't use the Bible to prove the Bible. That's just circular reasoning, right? It's like saying, I'm telling the truth because I say I'm telling the truth. It just doesn't work. To really genuinely test if it's reliable, you have to look outside the book for corroboration, for evidence from history or archaeology that backs up what it says. And honestly, this is where things get really fascinating. For centuries, critics just dismissed huge parts of the Bible as pure myth. King David, they said he was just alleged. The entire Hittite Empire, made up, a total fiction. Pontius Pilate probably never existed. But then, archaeology started digging. And what did they find? A stone tablet was unearthed that literally mentions the House of David. Thousands of Hittite artifacts were discovered, proving an entire empire was real. They even found a stone inscription in Caesarea with Pontius Pilate's name carved right into it. Over and over again, things that were called fiction were suddenly backed up by hard physical evidence.
Okay, but what about another huge challenge? Has the text been changed or corrupted over thousands of years of copying? Well, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls back in 1947 put that to the ultimate test. They found a scroll of the book of Isaiah that was 1,000 years older than any copy we had at the time. And when they compared it to the version we have today, it was over 99% identical. That showed a level of preservation that is just mind-blowing. And finally, just think about how this book was even put together. We're talking about more than 40 different authors. You've got kings, fishermen, prophets, doctors, writing over a span of 1,500 years on 3 different continents, and yet the argument goes, all 66 of these separate books somehow tell one single, unified story from start to finish. I mean, the statistical odds of that happening just by chance are absolutely staggering.
So, after walking through this whole framework of evidence from the design in the cosmos to the compass in our conscience and the facts in the historical record, we're kind of left with a really powerful question. What does it all mean? So let's just do a quick recap of the logical steps we took here. Step 1. The universe seems to show signs of a designer. Step 2. Our own moral compass points to a lawgiver. Step 3. The Bible is presented as the manual from that designer. And step 4. That manual is then tested against external evidence and, as the argument goes, it passes.
But, at the end of the day, the purpose of this manual isn't just about proving a bunch of historical facts. According to the book itself, its whole point is to be a guide, like a lamp for your feet, something that gives you direction and a little bit of light to help you navigate this messy, complicated thing we call life. And that really brings us to the final, and maybe the most important question of all. The evidence we've looked at, it isn't presented as just some fun intellectual puzzle. It's meant to be a personal challenge. The question pivots from, is this book true? To, what if it is? What would it actually mean for your life, for our whole world? If the biggest claim in this manual, that you were created, that you are known, and that you are loved by the very same being who designed the stars, is actually real? That's the question this whole framework leaves us with, and it's one we each have to answer for ourselves.